she and her husband, name was probably 15 years ago, I suppose. She said that he's been dead 12 years, I think she said, in that little
All
script
right.
she sent to Adam.
Yeah.
He was a builder, and they have a very large, one lovely home at Murrum Bateman, which is about 20k out of Canberra, something like that, in the country. I can remember her as she was 6 years older, but I remember her as a kid when the family visiting too. You know, when
Yeah.
all these back and forth. Faded out a bit later on. The time I was around, aware of it, I'll say about 5, 6, 8 years of age, I suppose. There were still the occasional visits, but nowhere near as
Yeah.
as it was in the older days.
I suppose once they get settled somewhere else, they make more friends there, don't they? And
yeah,
you
they
know,
do. And I think there was a bit of a falling out too, which he wouldn't be aware of, I guess. She mentions the Chev 6 that my grandfather had, lovely old motor car, but he got that with his heart. He wasn't able to drive, and through the war, it was put on
right.
because people couldn't afford petrol and so on.
Yeah.
Eventually, a deal was done with Frank Bishop he bought the car or sold it on or something, I don't know. Grandfather sometime later discovered he'd been done in a bit somewhere, found Frank hadn't looked after him as well as he should have done with this transaction. And
Oh, right.
There was
Yeah.
a bit of ill feeling, I think, and I think things sort of tapered off a bit from there.
Shame that, isn't it?
Well, it's pretty amazing that you said that, because it feels like you've been reading my sheets. You just answered my first questions, which was did you remember Merrill from when you were younger, and did you remember the car?
Yes, the Chev. Well, it was one of those. It was a deluxe model, and all the upholstery was sort of a velvety type of stuff, and had little hanger things in the back, you know, which you hang onto, and so on. A lovely old car. Grandfather loved his car, but he didn't drive it very often. Well, we couldn't afford to anyway. Petrol was very expensive in those days. But we used to take the back seat out, and when Barry and I were there, and my brother, and we'd drive off into the bush and load it with big logs of wood, fire, and cut up and chucked it in the back, and we'd ride, come back with the two of us kids sitting in the back seat riding on the wood. So it was used in that way too. So
yeah.
Useful thing. The interesting thing is that often we'd unload the car and get all the wood out, and we'd find we'd been sitting on a redback spider or something like that. That's pretty horrible. Yeah, the old Chevy's a lovely old car, and I think, as I say, it's the way it moved on was sad.
Yeah.
But, it sat on blocks for some time in the garage.
Did he buy it and then after a bit discover he had a heart condition and couldn't drive it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
He was actually forbidden to drive.
Right. I bet that upset him then, having that car, and you know.
Yeah, he probably did. Look, he was pretty philosophical, I guess. I mean, he came back from the First World War, and I think a lot of those returned servicemen were pretty laid back about life after that, after being what they'd been through. And I think he just rolled with the punches, really. You know, he had heart problems, and every week he used to go and visit the doctor down the road. Of course, they had nowhere near the control and medical help that's available to people with heart problems nowadays.
No.
In fact, he had a leaky valve, apparently. They'd fairly promptly fix that sort of stuff now. So I guess it's the sign of the times, I suppose.
It's amazing, isn't it? Coming through the First World War after all that crap, and then, you know, you've got a bad heart. I suppose you think, I survived that. So
yes, that's right. Yeah, you just take one thing at a time, I suppose. Frank Merrill's mentioned that he was a fairly large man. He was. And I was working in Parliament House myself, as I think I've mentioned. I was on the engineering staff there for a time. And because I knew Frank as a kid, Uncle Frank, it was
Yeah.
hard in a work environment to still call him Uncle Frank when I met him in the corridors. But he had a big voice, and you could hear him wherever he was. You could, there's Frank Bishop down there somewhere.
I suppose it seemed a more friendly place then, did it? With people you'd known, like.
Yeah, and oh goodness me, this is gobbling up my battery. I've just got down to low battery. I'm going to have to plug in over here. So I'm moving now.
Okay.
Where I can plug myself in.
Yeah, see, my battery's on 35 at the moment. So.
Yeah, I've just dropped down to 20. Hang on, I'll just plug in. Here we go. Does that still work?
Yeah. Yeah, we can still see you.
Okay, I'll sit out over here now, because the lead's not very long. Oh dear.
You can get
Not so comfy.
Problems of modern science. Yeah, the old house, and since all this has been stirred up, it's really renewed for me a lot of my memories of Old Parliament House. And I've said to you, Barry and I used to visit grandfather there.
Yeah.
And through the school holiday, and when the house was in recess, security then was nil, really, and you could just walk in and wander around. Of course, there are areas you couldn't go into, but we used to, of course, because grandfather had access to a lot of that place. And then later on, working there, I was poking my nose into every corner of the place.
All those you'd missed when you were a kid.
Sorry, yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
Well, I had a call one day to our area that there was something wrong with the air handling, air conditioning, or whatever it was in the cabinet room. Now, the Prime Minister's office was adjacent to that, and there was a little reception desk outside. So I went around there, and Menzies himself, the Prime Minister, was at the desk. And I turned up, and he said, "Oh, young man, what can I do for you?" I said, "Well, you've put a call in about a problem with your air conditioning here." "Oh, yes, come on with me." And the cabinet was sitting, all these fellas sitting around this big table. "Gentlemen, this young man has a job to do. Just sit back and relax for a while, and he'll look after it." I've never forgotten it.
Were you thinking, I hope I can cure it?
The pressure was on. You wouldn't get that these days, would you?
Well, no. You think about the security now of getting into the cabinet room. Goodness me. But yeah. I suppose on staff, I was a trusted member of the establishment, I suppose. I don't know.
Yeah.
Anyway, things change, don't they?
Oh, yeah, yeah.
You had that kind of like experience there. Did Arthur, your grandfather, have that sort of like connection, as in like he was wandering in and out of the building and stuff? Because he worked there for a while, didn't he? Did Arthur?
Yeah, I think I mentioned all that. He and Frank Bishop moved from Melbourne with Parliament in 1927. They were both working in the temporary Parliament. Was in the original Australian government used the Victorian Parliament buildings for some years after the Constitution was formed and the states were sort of in their place. The Federation then came about, and eventually the Parliament moved to the new Parliament House in Canberra, and they started constructing that in about 1923, I think, or something like that. And it was opened in 1927. So all those people who had been working with Parliament in Canberra were transferred, in Melbourne, transferred to Canberra.
Of course, that's when they moved, wasn't it?
Sorry?
Of course, that's when they moved, wasn't it? It's just come back in my mind about Arthur and Maud moved from Melbourne to Canberra, didn't they?
Canberra, and with the bishops, and they, as Mel has said, gee, she put that together pretty quickly, didn't she? Her little scree, they were fairly closely settled, houses reasonably close together, but I hadn't realised how quickly they'd actually moved out. I thought they were there for some years, but according to Merrill, Frank built his home in Flinders Way fairly soon afterwards.
Yeah.
I had the impression it wasn't as quick as that, but then again, I guess that's a memory that she has, more familiar than I would be. But of course, then they worked as I said, in parallel. They had similar sort of jobs at that time, and they both rose to the point where they were the head man in that particular area of the support in the house. And as you came into the Parliament, up the steps into the main hall in those days, there was an office each had an office on each side of that staircase. Arthur on the Senate side and Frank on the Rep side. But then our memories differ, because she says that Frank became housekeeper in, I think, 1951 or something like that. It had to be earlier than that, because grandfather applied for that job too when I was living with them.
Okay.
And he was unsuccessful, and then I left Canberra and he died within a year of my leaving Canberra. So I think that if that's the case, Frank would have been housekeeper there for a couple of years longer than Merrill remembers. She does.
Yeah.
It could be just a variation.
Yeah, I guess. You know, we oldies have a bit of a problem with the old memories.
I do myself.
Yeah. The years merge.
Yeah. But of course, the Parliament House was a big part of our lives, because particularly now through the war cabinet met for. Arthur didn't come home for days sometimes. They had temporary accommodation in the house, and they just slept there. The sittings went on to wee hours of the morning sometimes. So it was a pretty difficult time all round. And I can remember that he'd come home after a few days in the house pretty weary. But it was, and then of course at Christmas time, they always had carols by candlelight at Parliament House.
Right.
In the grounds, and there'd be rows and rows of people on the lawn outside with candles every Christmas, and that was a pretty major event for us as kids too.
Yeah. A really nice happening, I suppose, wasn't it? You know, to look forward to.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, and I guess Canberra was like that. I suppose most of our cities were in those days pretty laid back. There was no real security of any sort. You know, it was pretty basic. And, I think everybody sort of felt that Parliament was theirs and they could just wander in. Well, you still can do, but by gee, you go through a security system nowadays.
There you go. You would do, yeah.
Yeah. I suppose you could go, I'm going to tell the Prime Minister what I think of him and go in. But like everywhere now, you know, it's barriers, isn't it? And have you got a pass? Have you applied to come in?
Yeah, well, of course, that's how, and as I say, Bob Menzies used to just wander around. He could just run into him as you walked up the stairs into King's Hall. Bob could be just wandering around the place. There's a lot of other politicians too.
Yeah.
So it was possible to go and tap him on the shoulder and say, "G'day, Bob." I suppose.
I remember you saying that you weren't aware of any Ransom family visiting as such, apart from Beatrice and Maud knowing each other. But did you ever have any visits from Savage family in England? No.
They was completely cut off. And Maud never returned to England. I don't know how she felt about that. She never really talked about it. I don't know whether she felt lonely at times, particularly through the war when Arthur was away. But he, of course, had his war years there, so it was a couple of times. But no, and there was never any visitation from anybody that I can remember about. The only English people we ever saw were people living in a hostel too far away, which set up for English migrants, families, and there was a bus stop right outside my grandparents' home, within walking distance of that hostel, and these people, when they found work or going shopping or whatever, would come to that bus stop, and grandfather, if they're going to work in the bus, he'd chat them up. Grandmother used to chat the ladies up when they were going off shopping, and so as a result of that, we used to have a fairly steady stream of UK people visiting. Some of them became really close friends.
Yeah.
But other than that, we had no family visit sort. I guess travel wasn't then.
No, I think it was expensive then just to go and see your relatives, wouldn't it?
Oh, I think so. Yeah.
Yeah.
Of course, most of it would have been by ship, and what's that? Several weeks of travel.
Yeah.
Yeah, a long time.
Yeah, I suppose.
So, when I first spoke to you on the first conversation, or the second, something like that, you mentioned about Maud was running a hospital at one point. I'm sure you said that she was one of.
No, that was my mother's mother.
Oh, your mother's mother. Ah, okay.
Yeah, my grandmother on my mother's side. Her. Well, I think I mentioned their family anyway, but her father was a chef or something. I can't quite remember. Anyway, something back then, and he became he pulled down on a job in Canberra, managing a government hostels. Now, as Canberra grew, they had to provide accommodation not only for families on a temporary basis until housing became available, but they also provide accommodation for single people in the public service, especially women. So they had single men's hostels and they had single women's hostels.
Right.
And they were scattered around the city, and some of them were very high standard and some not so high. But my mother's mother then, her family moved to Canberra in 1924. And his job was to manage a new hostel about to open, Foreman House as it was called. Foreman was, military bloke, I think. Anyway, and when they moved to Canberra, the building is now Government House, the outskirts of the town. That was a government hostel at the time. The government had requisitioned it and they turned it into a hostel for families. And grandparents, my mother and family lived in Government House for 6 months. But he became seriously ill and rushed off to Sydney, where he died. So that left the family stuck in Government House, and this job's still pending. So apparently, I don't know how that worked in those days. Grandmother was given the job to open that hostel, Foreman House, and that was her first job as housekeeper, come manager of that hostel. That was a single women's hostel. And it was not very far from grandparents' home in Ainslie, from the Savage home in Ainslie.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that family lived in that hostel. Well, they didn't really, because it was not. Grandmother had a small flat there. So my mother and her two sisters were shoved off to a convent in Queanbeyan, which is miles away. And they lived in the convent accommodation for a while, and eventually came back when grandmother was allocated a house opposite Gorman House, and they lived outside there then. So it's all, it's interesting history.
It is
actually rather funny that Gorman House was closed as a hostel. And was used then for other purposes. It was used as a police barracks for a while, for the police academy or college. Then it was opened up to the community, and they had sort of markets there every second Saturday, and there were party places had their premises there and so on. But I went to one of the markets one day, and there was a woman had a stall set up in one of the corridors, selling trinkets or something, I can't remember, and behind her was rather a large photograph of Gorman House residence, and with them was my grandmother in this photograph. And I just wished I didn't have that sort of phone then. I didn't take a photo of it. I don't know how to get to that photo now. And Adam would probably find a way to get to it.
It's probably online somewhere.
somewhere.
It's probably in the National Gallery's collection somewhere, I suppose, archives. Anyway, I said to this woman in this stall, you might be interested to know the history. That's my grandmother in that photograph, and she was the man. Well, she couldn't care less. And I thought, what's wrong with people? Surely she'd be interested. She
Yeah.
flogging flogging her wares, and there's a bit of history right behind her shoulder, you know.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. That reminds me, totally unrelated to that, but the same kind of situation was when I think it was my second daughter was born. I was at the hospital with my mum and dad as we came away, and Lisa was still in the hospital. And on the wall was a photograph, a big photograph of the history of like childbirth in Birmingham, and it had a big picture of the small hospital where I was born. It wasn't really a hospital; it was more like a home, wasn't it, Dad? It was like a house converted.
Yeah.
And my mum actually pointed to a picture on the top of the house and says, "That's the actual room you were born in." And I remember somebody was wandering past at the time, and my mum thought she'd tell them the story, and they had no interest. We were like, that's my history.
Your history. Well, you know, the funny thing about history, Canberra's water supply came from a small dam out in the mountains, not too far away, the Cotter Dam. And that was gravity fed to a pumping station across the river, and then pumped into reservoirs outside the town. So it was gravity feed into the town everywhere, into the city, and that's where the water treatment was too, at Mount Stromlo. But that pumping station goes way back into the 1920s, I suppose. But as a young bloke, I was involved there a few times on the pump system, working on the pumps and the valves and all that sort of stuff occasionally. But and then they built new dams outside Canberra, so it was gravity feed all the way to the reservoirs rather than having to use the pumps. I suppose from about 1970 or something, 60s. Anyway, so the pumping station became a bit derelict. And I was driving past one day with my friend Eileen, as it happens, and there was the gates were open and they had security gates around it, and there was utility there and electricians, I think, obviously someone working in there. So I said, well, let's go in and have a look and see what they're doing with their old pumping station. And they were huge pumps, they were multi-stage pumps and really big things. We went in there and this bloke was wandering around. I said, well, do you mind if we have a look around? No. He said, we're refurbishing it as a tourist thing. We're getting it set up so that Canberrans can wander in and have a look at the old pumping and the old history. So up behind the pumping floor was a sort of mezzanine floor with a records keeping area, and there were benches there and they're all logging and so on. And there was a pedestal thing, something like a church lectern. And on this was a book, record book, and I opened it, and the page I opened up to, right to that page, was the day that I was born in Canberra and the records of the pumping of water to Canberra on that day.
Wow.
I got photos of it. I thought, I just don't believe that.
No.
How's that for chance?
That's fantastic, isn't it, to see that?
Yeah, absolutely amazing, isn't it?
Amazing. And there weren't many books there. And I just couldn't believe that. But this just happened to be the one that someone had obviously put there and opened it. Maybe they must have had interest on that day as well, I suppose. I don't know. So
it's a real shame. It's a real shame you didn't have mobile phones back then. Because you could literally take a picture.
I took a photo, so either I had my camera with me or I probably have my camera with me. I don't know. But somewhere in my annals, I've got a record of the pumping history of the pumping of water to Canberra on the day of my birth. I think that's pretty important, I suppose. But it's amazing how sometimes you just fall into these things, and
it really is, yeah.
Without planning them, don't you?
Yeah.
When you were doing your family history, going back a few years, did you get very far with savages?
Well, I did. I think I said to you that I was using both heritage and the other mob. And I thought I'd generated quite a family tree, and I'd got a little way back. But somehow, when after being involved with you, I tried to chase all that up because I hadn't accessed it for some years. And yet, Ancestry wouldn't let me in anyway unless I paid lots of money. And Heritage, what's left there, I put in there, was only a fairly skeletal sort of tree from this side of the family. So.
Yeah.
No, I don't know whether because I didn't use it, it's fell into disrepute. I don't know what happened to
It-
it. Adam. It's gone.
It could be a different account, and that could be like you had another account. Or,
Yeah, I don't know. Well,
But,
I think
yeah.
the heritage thing is not my account anymore. My brother's grandson got involved at school in a project, and he started off with the heritage thing, and they keep sending me stuff now with that side of the family, his mother's side, well, his grandmother's side on the other side of the family, the Wrens. I have no idea who those people are, so I don't really follow it really.
Yeah.
It's there, so.
well, even though the Savages aren't our family, we were actually just quite interested, so we thought we might have a little investigation ourselves.
Yeah, look at well. I think I've told you that I had grandfather's address. They lived in Tooting, and I've actually stood outside the house in Google Earth. I didn't go there, but I know nothing about that side of the family at all.
Okay, so anything further back from that, you didn't know. So
I
anything
don't know.
further back from
Well,
that?
I think I had got back a bit further. And my impression was that I'd gone back a couple of generations, Adam, but I really don't know, and I don't know where to start now to follow it up, you know.
Well, just checking because I thought if we look into it, then if you knew something, then we could start at that point. But that's fine. Leave it to us.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I don't have any of that data, and
Okay.
I'd be scratching just as you would be now, I suppose. But I think your resources and your enthusiasm is a lot better than mine on both counts, I think.
Some might call it an obsession.
He seems to find obscure things anyway.
Well,
Tell
yeah.
you what, this one tonight, I was looking
Sorry?
for different things to look into, like so we can chat about it. And there's one person I don't think we've discussed before, well, not in depth, and he went to Australia as well. And it was, James William Eyre Ransom, the chocolate beer guy. He had a brother, Arthur Clarence Ransom, and he went to Queensland. And about a year ago, I did some checking, and just before I spoke to you, and I found that he had a wife in Queensland, and he had 4 daughters, but I didn't look into it any further than that. I completely forgot about it. So that's the next person I think we need to trace.
So when did he come to Australia?
I'll have a check for you now. Hold on. I've got it on the screen so I could remember.
So I wonder if Maud would have known that. Was it that time or sometime later?
Sometime later, I think. I think
Well, he was like her uncle, wasn't he?
He was. So he went to Australia. Let's have a look. Right, he was living in Brentford in 1871.
Right.
And he was getting married in Queensland in 1887.
Oh.
So we don't have any records like in the middle of that. So between 1871 and 1887, he moved to Queensland.
So who would have been getting on a bit when Maud and Arthur moved to Australia then in 1911?
I'm going to try and do something with the share. I'm going to share a file with you now. So you carry on talking. I'm just going to share my screen.
If we disappear, then
yeah, right. You should now see my phone.
Yeah, I can see that.
Well, I go to Ancestry.
Yeah, right. Well, Maud never talked about a relative in Queensland that I knew
of. They get everywhere, these families.
So he's your second great uncle.
Right.
I don't know how you can see this screen.
Yeah, we can see that. Yeah.
Okay.
He got married in Queensland in 1887.
Yeah.
His family was
Ransom.
Yeah, he married Frances Canty.
Yep.
And then he had 4 daughters, And one of his daughters was this woman here. I found a photograph of her.
Oh, wow. Oh, gee. Oh,
But that's where my trail ends. I completely forgot about it.
so the Ransom name died out then. There were no sons.
I've made, yeah, here. I said, most likely the Ransom name is gone.
Okay.
But
Well,
they may have some of, like, inherited things, photographs or whatever.
well, Adam, it might be the same story as the Calorks in Western Australia. I don't know what the problem was there, but
Yeah.
They don't want to know us.
they just don't want to know.
Bit of a shame that, John, wasn't it, when he went to all that effort?
Yeah, it was a shame. But I thought,
Yeah.
well, you've got to respect their need for privacy or whatever they felt they needed. Anyway, but apparently he may have been a bit reluctant. Oh, there's a picture of me there in a big way now, instead of tiny little one. If I lost Adam, there he is. Apparently that business that he was running, that particular Clark, fell on hard times. I think there was a bankruptcy thing there or something. So
Right.
there may have been some reason there that he didn't particularly want to get involved. I don't know.
Yeah.
It could have been bad timing, couldn't it?
Could have been. But of course, there were the others, though, and I didn't follow any of the other two brothers. I didn't follow that up. Could have done, I guess. But, you know, had limited time in Perth, and I didn't have time to base that around, you know.
Yeah.
No, you don't want to waste all your time, do you? You know, you've tried with one.
Well, no, Clive. The trouble was, of course, we were on a tour, and we were tied to a timetable all the time. So we didn't have a lot of time to ourselves to do our own thing. That's the trouble with those sort of conducted tour things. You go where you're told, don't you?
Yeah.
Yeah.
In other family news, all the history going back to the chocolatier, and then before him, his family were from Norfolk, so Holcombe Hall and stuff like that. Yeah. Here's my reading material at the moment that I've got on Holcombe Hall and our ancestors. Hold on. So I got this book yesterday. That's about all the people who used to work at Holcombe Hall, all the servants and stuff like that. And I got this about who used to live in the area, and that's got mention about some of our family in there as well.
Gee.
And then I've got this massive book that's all about the people who used to work there as well. Wow. So you can. I've got a lot of reading material to get through.
Easy reading.
I reckon. Now, we're talking about that. How the heck did you get onto Merrill Hunter?
Oh, well, you mentioned Merrill Hunt? Yeah, you mentioned the book.
Yes,
well, Merrill Hunt. I was trying to find out who wrote the book, and so I thought I'll try and get a hold of a copy. And I couldn't find a copy. It was really frustrating me. I saw a copy of Aid Books, and it was £20, which is good. That's fine. I'll pay that. But the delivery was £28. I thought, I'm not paying that. I'm not paying like 58 for a book. So anyway, I thought, I wonder if I mean, she must be getting on a bit, because you said born 1930, so I thought it could still be alive. Yeah. So I looked online, and she's done lots of writing. So there was lots of mention of different book presses where she'd had stuff published. I think there was a guy called Bob Macklin, who was like a promoter of her books in the past. And on a web page that he was interviewed, her email address was there. So I thought, I'll email it. I'll see where it gets her. And she responded literally about 6 hours later. And I thought, fantastic. She's still, it sounds funny, but she's still alive. Great.
Yeah.
So I've not replied yet.
Hold on a second. I've got a phone call from a daughter. I'll have to just hang a second. I'll just come back to you in a minute.
Yeah, okay. Yeah. Yeah, it was amazing she answered, wasn't it? So quick.
It was, yeah. She seems like she's still quite sharp, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
She wrote a lot of information quite quickly. Well, I guess she got some of it written down, but She seemed to compile it just for like me.
Are we back
Yeah.
again?
Oh,
There
that's
we are.
quick.
That was Christine inviting me to a cup of tea at 10 o'clock. So I
Aha.
said, well, we'll see how we go. So
Yeah, I was
so
literally just saying to my dad that
you actually, did you email her or you didn't ring her? So how did you contact her?
no, I'm not
Speaker
like you.
off. Hold on. Speaker off.
Is that better? No, the opposite. You've just muted yourself. You press the
Is
microphone.
that better?
That's better, yeah.
I can barely hear you. What's happened here?
Hold on.
Oh, right.
Is that better?
Your turn fully up. So
I can hear you, Adam. So,
speaker off, it's saying. Can you hear me?
yes.
I can hear you. Let me try.
You're
Shall I
very faint.
Shall I restart the call?
Yeah, righto.
Yeah, okay.